Hello to everyone who is watching this recording. A very warm welcome to the third episode of the Revolutionize STEM Women in STEM webinar series. Today we are speaking with Dr. Chagpar, who is a full professor in the Department of Surgery at Yale School of Medicine. She completed her BSc in Honors Biochemistry and MD with honors in research in the University of Alberta and her general surgery residency training and MSc at the University of Saskatchewan. She enjoys teaching and mentoring medical students, residents, and she is passionate about global health and leadership in academic medicine.
Hi, Dr. Chagpar.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, how are you?
I am well.
All right, I'm Joshna. I'm the one who invited you. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the third episode of Revolutionize STEM's webinar series. Please mute yourselves and on your camera if possible. We will be talking to Dr. Chagpar today, who is a professor of surgery at Yale School of Medicine. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to talk to us, Dr. Chagpar. Would you like to start off by introducing yourself?
Sure. So hello, I'm Honors Chagpar. I am a professor of surgery at Yale. I do breast cancer surgery, and it's delightful to be with you today.
Okay, so what inspired you to pursue this pathway of breast surgery? Why not something else? Why not something different?
Yeah, so I think to begin with, no one in my family had done medicine. But I think that early on, I became really fascinated with the field. I mean, whether it was, just being curious about science and anatomy and math. I was the kid in grade 4 who loved dissecting frogs and understanding the anatomy and physiology of how things worked. When so I entered college and did a degree in biochemistry with the view of entering medicine. And ultimately, I thought that I might want to be a surgeon. I had no real reason for that, aside from the fact that I kind of thought that many of the things that I knew about myself would fit with what I thought was the persona of the surgeons. So, I enjoy working with my hands. I'm a problem solver. I like immediate gratification. So see the problem, fix the problem, next problem. I like working in teams. I like leading teams. And so many of these qualities I thought would fit with a surgical temperament. I entered medical school and started shadowing surgeons, and I loved it. Many of them at that time were old white men, and but they were great old white men. They were fun to be around. They were smart, and not just book smart, but common sense smart, street smart, so that if there was a problem, they would be able to figure out what was the problem and be able to fix it, rather than necessarily being somebody who is very pensive and thinks. And I loved that. And I loved being in the operating room, and I loved working with my hands, and I loved being in a team environment, and I found it exciting and interesting. And so it cemented my view that I wanted to do surgery. Now, getting close to my third year in medical school, so here we have 4 years of medical school before you need to make a decision about what postgraduate training you want to do, what field you want to enter into for residency. I had thought, I've spent all of this time really focused on surgery and I love it, but how do I know that I might not love something else more? And so I arranged my rotations in such a way that I had some time in medicine and OBGYN and psychiatry and other things. And as I went through those, I enjoyed those, but nothing was as much fun as surgery. And so I went into surgery, And when I was in my surgery residency, I found that I really liked breast cancer for a million reasons, right? The cases were not too short, like a 15-minute cataract, but they weren't too long, like a 15-hour transplant. Patients were not really, really sick, like vascular patients who have many other comorbidities. They were relatively well. They were often facing life-threatening situations. So people, when given a diagnosis of cancer, feel like their world is going to turn upside down. But I was able to, as a breast cancer surgeon, write that, right? So you take out the cancer and you tell them that they're going to do well. That was the other thing, is that in breast cancer, patients generally do well. I liked the fact that research moved at a very rapid pace in breast cancer, as opposed to other fields where the pace was not as rapid. I liked being in a very big team. So in breast cancer surgery, you know, there's the medical oncologist and the radiation oncologist and the radiologists and the pathologists and the plastic surgeons and the anesthesiologists and the nurses and the social workers, and it's a very big team, and you're all dedicated to providing care to the patients. And I liked the fact that aesthetically the outcomes were beautiful, so it had kind of that element, but at the same time it wasn't vain like plastic surgery. So as I went through thinking about all of the options, I really came to the field that I love.
It's amazing to hear how you took your passion further and, like discovered yourself along the way and became accomplished in so many different fields. And you mentioned that the field of medicine was made up of primarily men when you were studying. So for you, what is the importance of women in your field? And do you have any words of inspiration for women who would like to go down the pathway you pursued, but, don't know where to start?
Yeah. So I think that, the doors are open. So the first thing I would say is, don't let anyone tell you that you can't do anything because you happen to be female. That has nothing to do with it. So I remember back in the day, I was in a lab and there was one of my colleagues who was an older Asian female in the lab. She said to me, I don't know if surgery, you should really be pursuing surgery. I mean, after all, you're a girl and, you have to stand for long hours. And I was like, so my legs work just as well as anybody else's. And so I would tell you to follow your passion. If you want to be a surgeon, be a surgeon. If you want to be an astronaut, be an astronaut. There is nothing that impedes women from doing anything that they want to do, especially if in the same way that there is nothing impeding men from doing what they want to do.
That was very inspirational, and I loved hearing how you clapped back at people who told you that you couldn't do it. So, what are some major possibilities for artificial intelligence in the field of surgery in the near future? And yeah, what do you think are the new tech? Sorry.
Yeah, so I mean, I think AI is moving in all fields, whether we talk about surgery, whether we talk about imaging, whether we talk about pathology. I'm certainly not the AI expert, but I will tell you that, using big data and machine learning and artificial intelligence is finding its way into medicine and surgery in a number of ways. So whether that is in helping with decision making or prediction modeling, whether that is in image analysis, which we use in imaging or in pathology, there are a number of areas that are being looked into. It's still, I think, finding its way to become really a dominant force, but it's already being utilized in the clinical space.
Yeah, it's amazing how so many different fields can come together when you think they're not really connected, but they are. So, what are the unique and different skills you have which make you stand out and be chosen as a professor of surgery? And what do you think are indicators of someone with potential to become a good surgeon?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't necessarily know that I'm unique, right? I think that anybody can do what I did. If I can do it, anybody else can do it equally well. I think that the idea comes back to following your passion, doing what you enjoy, working hard. I mean, right? I think that that is common for anything that you want to do. Um, and to be persistent. And you know, I think that in general, if you go into the field that you love to go into and you work hard, uh, you will be successful because you will be doing what you enjoy, and by definition, uh, you will work hard at it. And when you work hard at something that you enjoy, you get good at it, and and can can climb the ladder in that way. I don't think that there's anything particularly special or unique in my circumstance.
I'm sure that you have had a lot of different experiences as a surgeon, but what was the most memorable surgery you've ever had?
Gosh, that is a tough question. I think um, the most memorable is often the case that you get to do by yourself, that kind of puts you on that path. So I remember when I was in medical school, as I said to you, I spent a lot of time shadowing surgeons. I mean, every summer break, spring break, Christmas holiday, I took time to follow surgeons. Why? Because I enjoyed it, and it was fun. And so they got to know me. And one day, the operating rooms were really busy. I ended up volunteering to take call, overnight call with the residents, because it was fun for me. And so people get to know you and they know your work ethic. And I remember one night we were on call and it was really busy, and the emergency rooms were really busy. We had 3 traumas in emergency. We had 3 appendectomies that were lined up. And then, so we had finished the first one and there were more traumas in the emergency room. And so the resident said to the attending surgeon, "Hey, can Anise help you with this second appendectomy? Because, we're really busy in the emergency room and you know her, and, she can assist you." And so he said, "Yeah, sure, no problem." So I said, "Great," because then I could be a first assist instead of, like standing and holding a retractor. And I remember that case because we were standing outside the scrub sink, and Dr. Hitchie, who was the attending surgeon, he said to me, "Anise, do you know what a McBurney's incision is?" And I said, "No, but I know what McBurney's point is." He said, "Okay, what's McBurney's point?" So I told him what McBurney's point was, which is a point, halfway between the umbilicus and the anterior superior iliac spine, which overlies where the appendix is. And he said, "Good." He says, "Do you know what Langer's lines are?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "They're, the dermatologic lines that fold in the skin folds and so on." He said, "Oh, good." He said, "Well, McBurney's incision is an incision using Langer's lines that's over McBurney's point." I said, "Cool." So we're learning. I get into the operating room. The anesthesiologist actually ties up my gown. He says to me, "You're not a resident, are you?" I said, "No." He said, "But you want to be, right?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "You're better than some of the interns we have." Okay, so my head's beginning to swell, right? Anyways, we're standing at the operating room table. The patient's now asleep. Dr. Hitchie hands me the scalpel, and he says, well, go ahead. And I'm looking at him like, what? So he let me make that incision, just like we talked about. And then he said, well, keep going. And I ended up doing that entire case. Now, albeit with his supervision, but as a medical student, like, how often does that happen? Not very often. But that was the case that I remember the most, because I remember how humbled and gratified I was that they trusted me. And I remember how amazing that experience was, and how the patient ended up, came in with severe abdominal pain. And by the time he was in the operating room, felt much better. And I remember how much fun it was and how fulfilling it was. And I think that was the case that really cemented for me the fact that I wanted to be a surgeon.
Yeah, I think it's amazing how your work ethic led you to such an enormous opportunity. So, where do you think we can make the most impact in the detection or possibly the cure of cancer?
Yeah, so I mean, again, that's a really broad question, and there's so much ongoing research, right? So in terms of detection of cancer, there are all kinds of new imaging tests, new molecular tests that we are doing to kind of see whether we can find cancer early. There are all kinds of therapeutic modalities that are being evaluated. So immunotherapy is a big one that people are considering now. Targeted therapies, learning more about molecular biology, many aspects. I mean, far too many for us to cover in this short webinar. But for those who are interested, I would tell you that there are plenty of opportunities in research in that realm.
Yeah, I think with all the stories and, like what you've told us so far, I'm feeling very inspired and kind of maybe looking towards a medical career myself now. So, what are your tips for high school students in terms of extracurriculars related to medicine that they should do in order to get prepared for a medical career?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the first step is always figuring out what you really want to do, right? So medicine is not the only career. I would encourage you to kind of consider all of the things that you might be interested in, right? So that you don't go into life with blinders on, which is a little bit what I did, but I'd encourage you to kind of keep your options broad and really evaluate things so that you know what you're interested in. The second is, take the opportunities that are available to you to get as much experience as you can. So if you have an opportunity to shadow somebody or to, become an EMT or to, whatever it is, to get a little sense of what the career is like, that may be helpful. I think talking to people who are in the field. So you've got this webinar series. I know that I'm not the only one that you're talking to, but I think that also might help you in terms of, kind of getting a little taste of what different careers are like. Then I think, you've asked me a number of questions about research. If you're interested in research, explore that. See if there's a lab that you can work in or volunteer in that might give you a sense of that. And then I would continue to do the activities that are important and meaningful to you. So whether that is voluntary activities, sports, music, community involvement, because I think that keeping a well-rounded life is important, as well as those can help you to develop some leadership skills and social skills that are going to be important regardless of what field you want to go into.
Okay, thank you so much for that advice. I know I'll definitely be taking it and, grasping more opportunities from now on wherever I can. What are some processes or, themes that have changed in STEM compared to now and 20 years ago?
So, I mean, it depends on what you mean in terms of themes that have changed, right? I think that, um, you know, the the whole area of science, technology, engineering, and math um, continues to evolve, right? Especially in the sciences, we continue to innovate, and so we've already talked about a number of areas in terms of research that have grown. In terms of populations, so thinking about women in STEM, for example, I think that we're gaining more of a foothold, right? So in the past, uh, medicine, for example, was heavily male dominated, especially surgery. Um, Now, medical school classes are 50-50. There still are differences in terms of, more professors of surgery are male than female, more deans of schools of medicine are male than female, but that doesn't mean that that can always be the case. So I think that things will continue to evolve, both on the scientific front as well as on the social front.
Okay, I'll be looking forward to that in the STEM field. So what are other majors you would say that complement medicine?
So do you mean majors that would help you to get into medicine?
Yeah, or maybe uh, maybe you decide that medicine isn't for you. How could you take the education that you've already gained and maybe take it forward in another major?
Okay, so to be clear, medicine is a postgraduate degree after you have an undergraduate degree. So when you talk about majors, that usually refers to an undergraduate degree where you have a major in something, and then you do your MD, which is a solo career where there really is no other major. I am at least telling you this from the Canadian/US perspective. I realize that we have a global audience, and so things may be different in other parts of the world where everything is combined. Um, so based on the Canadian/US perspective, where there is an undergraduate, I would say that historically the majors that have been considered, quote, pre-med have been scientific in nature, but it doesn't have to be. So you can major in anything, so long as you meet the prerequisites for entering medical school. You can major now in art or history or languages or whatever you want to do. That there really is no singular pathway to getting into medicine, albeit that you need to understand that there are certain prerequisite courses that you need to take. In terms of the alternate question, which is, let's suppose you go into medicine and you decide you no longer want to do clinical medicine. Well, so I will tell you a couple of things. The first is, that's fine, right? You can do a number of other things. So, for example, you may be interested in pursuing more of a research career than a clinical career. There's no problem in that. You may want to get involved in public policy, maybe getting involved in politics. Maybe you want to do an additional degree in law and specialize in health law. Maybe you want to do journalism and do medical journalism. So I think that, the list is as long as your imagination, and there's plenty of opportunities. You may want to get involved in administration, be a hospital administrator. In general, however, if you, I think that the decision needs to be made conscientiously, in the sense that medical training is a long time, right? So it's not something that you kind of dabble in and then decide, well, I think I'll try something else. It generally is something that you're going to put forethought into. And that's why I said earlier that I think it's to your benefit to explore all of your options in advance and decide what it is you want to be when you grow up, knowing, of course, that you can always change your mind.
Thank you for that answer. I think, yeah, you definitely highlighted you have to be committed right from the start, but it's also okay to pursue other passions and be open-minded about that. So we recently opened up the chat to questions from the audience. And so one of the first questions is from David. I've heard that surgeons generally have extremely packed schedules and are on call almost every day and often have to sacrifice their own personal time for their career. How do you juggle your family time and your social life with your career as a surgeon?
So first off, I will say that, David, the stereotype that you elucidate is a stereotype, and that is not necessarily true for everyone. So I will tell you that you have the ability as a surgeon to decide what you want to do in large part, right? Now, there are always balances, right? There are always pluses and minuses to every decision that you make. So for example, you may say, I want to be very wealthy and I want to spend every minute in the hospital because I love my patients, I love my job, and this is a way to generate clinical revenue, and that is what makes me happy, and I am happy to sacrifice anything and everything for that. That's entirely your prerogative. Other people may say, I enjoy patient care, but I also want to spend time in the lab doing research, and so I'm going to balance this. Maybe I will make less money than the highly productive clinician, but I will be able to put out scholarly work, which makes me happy. Other people may say, well, that's fine. I want to see patients, I want to help the world, but I really, I'm married, I have children, I want to have, a family life. I want to attend my, son's baseball games or my daughter's flute recitals or whatever. I can do that as a surgeon. Now, it may be less lucrative, but if it makes me happy, then that might be what I choose to do. So, as in life, you have choices, but do not make the mistake of thinking that if you want to be a surgeon, you cannot have a life, because that simply is not true.
Thank you for clearing that up for us. So another question from the chat from Harita says, as DOs are becoming increasing common in the field of medicine, are there any differences in the type of residencies or in the type of physicians they can be when compared to people with an MD degree?
Yeah, so Haritha, it's a great question. It's a difficult one for me to answer. In general, I think that in large part, you can continue to do either. So for example, are there DO surgeons? The answer is yes. I do still think that there is some stigma, perhaps, attached to the DO degree versus the MD degree. Just in terms of stature, and I wonder whether all postgraduate opportunities are equivalent, because there may be some preconceptions about the degree that a particular program may want its candidates to have. So I'm not sure if that answers your question or not, but if you ask me, can a DO be a surgeon? The answer is yes.
Sorry. So another question from the chat is from Nay, and they ask, what was the most difficult part of your journey in medicine you had to go through?
That's a tough question, May. I don't know that I can enunciate any one particular part that was, quote, difficult. I think that as in life, there are a series of things that happen that pose challenges. And I think the main thing is, when you get knocked down, to get back up. And but I don't think that there was any one particular thing that I would say this is the most difficult thing. I think that life is just a series of challenges, and knowing how to rebound from those challenges is the important thing.
Okay, so unfortunately we are running out of time, so this is going to be the last question to wrap things up. What are some lessons you learned along the way in your medical journey that you would like to share with other students?
Yeah, I think that the key lesson is follow your passion, do what you enjoy, make sure that you keep an open mind, do your research, and work hard. I think that there are no real magical life lessons that you haven't heard of before. But the wisdom that your parents would have told you about working hard and studying hard and keeping an open mind and those kinds of things, that's all true. So hopefully that's helpful.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Chagpar, for answering our questions today. Sorry if we pestered you too much, but yeah,
No,
you
not
were
at all.
you were such an inspirational figure, and we learned so much. I loved hearing you talk about the different parts of your career and how much you learned about them. And you definitely inspired me to take a look into medicine as maybe a future major. So, if anyone wants to refer to this webinar later on, because it has a lot of useful stuff, it will be on the Revolutionize STEM YouTube channel, and I'll put a link to that right here. And thank you so much for attending. Thank you again so much, Dr. Chagpar, for being in our webinar. And have a great weekend, everyone.
My
Bye.
pleasure. Take care, everyone.